Hello everyone, this is Aaron Johnson with the Johnson iRacing team. I'm at Thompson Motorsports Park in a practice session at this point in time, and I've heard from a few of you through some messages via the iRacing interface that a lot of you guys are struggling at Thompson Motorsports Park here, struggling to try to get any kind of speed. I can run some pretty good laps. I've been able to race in the top split fairly regularly here. And a couple of folks have asked me how I go about, where do I get my setups? And the answer is I build my own. My brother Joe and I on the Johnson iRacing team, we do share some ideas, but we build our own setups. It's very, very rare that we get any setup from anywhere else. So we really just kind of build our own. We may base it on another setup, so we could import a setup from another track, or we may start with the iRacing setup. What I've done, if you'll notice here, I've loaded the Thompson Motorsports Park setup from iRacing. I thought what I might do is walk you through the steps that I take to build a set. Now, one of the first things that I always try to do is I always try to have the driving line on when I practice. It helps me be more consistent. It's available to everyone in the iRacing Legends Cup Series. As you get to be better and better, you will want to turn it off if you want to move up, because in the higher series, you're not always going to be able to use that driving line. But it's just a way to identify your entry and exit points, where you're going to brake if you need brake, where you're going to get on and off the throttle, and those kinds of things. So I really think it's a good idea to have that line for reference. Where the first thing we're going to do is go into the garage. Right up front, we're going to look at this setup for iRacing. It's got 19 pounds on the left side, 25 on the right side. I think that's terribly high. It looks like the cross weight's about 52.4%. We've got the stiffest spring in the right front, followed by the left front, then the right rear, and the left rear. That's a very typical pavement oval setup. To give you a little background here, just so you know, from 1989 to 1997 or 1998, I was a crew member, and for 5 of those years, crew chief for a short track racing team that took 4 and sometimes 5 cars to race on the pavement in southern Missouri and then up in the Kansas City area on a regular basis. We won a fair number of races and a few championships. And my job was to take care mostly of springs, tires, and shocks. That was kind of what I did. So I'm not always the best at front end geometry. I don't always know the best about what we need to do with sway bars and things like that, but I have a feel for spring, shocks, and tires. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to walk you through my approach to making a race setup. I'm going to start out by just running a few laps in this iRacing setup, and I'm going to turn my volume inside the car down a little bit so it's a little easier to hear me speak. And we're going to just jump in and we're going to run 4 or 5 laps and see maybe what that looks like. We'll follow the driving line out. I'm going to go ahead and shift up into high. I don't know what to expect with this setup, so I'm not going to drive into the corner super hard. We'll go just a little below that driving line, let the car drift up, then roll back into the throttle. Down in the bottom left, you can see my steering wheel. I was pointing there, so I got the wall. You can also see where I let off the gas, and when and if I start to roll back in it, and by how much. You'll notice I don't immediately get back in the throttle full. I know a lot of drivers like to do that. I think it's better for tires to stay off the full throttle until you're good and settled. So let's see what the first lap here is. First lap we run is a 23.002. It's a 23.002, a really good lap for me. On a 97 degree track, that's our track temperature today, would be around a 22.05 with the setup that I've built for this particular track. But we're running on the iRacing setup. I'm going to be pretty happy if I can get down around 22.8, 22.7. 22.765. All right, so right off the bat, we're about 22.7. The car just feels slow. If I slow down enough to stay stable in the corners, I don't really have any speed coming off. If I drive into the corners hard to try to hold that speed, then the car tends to push up. So I feel like the car maybe is a little bit tight. This lap a fair amount slower than that last one. 22.873. Roll back into the throttle coming out of 2. Let that car drift up to the wall. The straightaway's long here. The corner's narrow, highly banked but narrow. I tend to go in a little under that line, let the car drift up to just over it, and then as I come out, back toward the line again. So it's a little bit of a diamond shape attack pattern in the corner for me. 22. Pretty good lap there, down to 6.86. I think we're going to run maybe 6 or 7 laps and kind of see what this feels like. Still feels kind of tight coming out. The car wants to move up the racetrack toward the wall, We call that a push condition or a tight condition. I always said that if your car is pushing, you get to see the wreck. I mean, if your car is loose, you spin out and you back into the wall so you don't actually see the crash. The car feeling, I mean, it's really stable, it's easy to drive, it's also slow, and this is just a slow race car. We'll drive in, come out of turn 3 here. We'll come across the start-finish line one more time, and then we'll go ahead and hit the brakes. 22.764. And we'll get out of the car here if we can. We're just going to go ahead and hop out. We'll go to the garage, take a look at things. Right front's at 97%, right rear at 99%. That's a very good indication that the car is too tight. The other thing that I would tell you right up front is that these little cars like low tire pressures. I tend to run tire pressures in the 10 range on the left, sometimes 11, sometimes 12, and down around 13 or 14 on the right. I'm going to go ahead and drop these to 13 to start with, and we're just going to run a 10 and 13 initially and see what happens. So we're going to make this one change. We're going to apply it. We're going to go, oh, it said we failed, so we're going to have to do something else here. We probably failed because our ride height dropped too low. If the ride height drops low, we're going to go ahead and raise the ride height on all 4 corners by the same amount. And that way our cross weight will stay very similar. We're at about 52.5. So really the only thing we're changing here is tire pressures. We're going to hop back in the car and we'll run another 5 or 6 laps. Again, follow that driving line out. Into turn number 3, start out a little high, let the car come under, then drift back up, roll into the throttle, don't just hammer it. Come off the turn, right up against the wall. Guess it'd help if we'd shift into high. And then follow that driving line that we've established where we come in a little low, let the car drift up, and then roll into the throttle. Little too deep into the corner that time. I'm pushy coming out, really pushy coming out. So it looks to me as if dropping those tire pressures has tightened this race car up. We may find that this car is a little bit slower on these low tire pressures. Ooh, pushing hard again out of the corner. It's almost impossible to drive that car, it's so pushy. Yeah, you can really see it sliding up. I'm putting a lot of wheel into the car and it just doesn't want to turn. So we need to do something to make this car turn. And one of the things that you'll hear on a regular basis is that once you get the stagger on your car set, you shouldn't use it to loosen or tighten the car. And that's kind of true because stagger has to do with the radius of the corner, and it's really about the difference in travel distance on those left side tires versus the right side tires. But I'm going to go ahead and up the stagger. I'm going to go ahead and bump it up to 0.875, 7/8 of an inch. I'm going to hop back into the car and we'll run a few more quick laps to see what kind of a difference that made. Our goal here is to build a setup that's going to be competitive for most drivers, not necessarily in that top split, but if your iRating's 1300 and you're running in the 3rd split pretty regularly, it'd be nice to have this setup run down around the 22.2 range. If we could get to 22.2, we'd be pretty quick, and then we'd start looking at, maybe in another video, how do we make a setup that holds speed. All right, I can already tell the car's a fair amount looser. You can see that as we came in. The car rotated much better in the center of the turn. We'll roll off, come in under it, let the car drift up just a little, roll back into the throttle, and still feels a little tight. I think we could probably go another 1/8 of an inch on the stagger. We'll go ahead and drive a few laps and see if this car comes to us any at all. As the tires warm up, we'll see if the car handles better. When we were racing back in Missouri, we always said the car would come to you if it would get better as you raced, and we saw that sometimes you have to do that on these short tracks. Is just, you know, set a car up so that it would take a few laps to come in, and then when it came in it'd be really good. It was very common if you were racing in a series that your feature race would involve the sun going down or the sun maybe getting higher overhead. So as that sun angle and the track temperature changed, 22.678. it made a big difference in the handling characteristics of the car. So 678 is okay, not great, not terrible. I think the car's still too tight, so I think we're just going to go ahead and, yeah, it's really, you can see it slide up there. I didn't even get in that hard, so car's still too tight. We're going to go ahead and get out. I'm going to make a couple of changes here. One to the interface. I want to turn off the all-time optional lap, and I want to use it to the session optimal lap. We want to see how close we can get to the very best lap in the session, and then we're going to go back over to the garage, and I think I'm really going to go ahead and just max that stagger out at 1 inch. That's the most stagger you can run in these Legends cars. It's what I typically run at most tracks. It's rare that I run less than 1 inch of stagger. There are a couple places where I'll do that, but at Thompson I tend to run 1 inch. So we changed the stagger to 1 inch. We're going to hop back in. We've got our lap time down to 22.67. Our best lap so far has been a 5:05 on that initial setup from iRacing. We want to get down into the 22.2 area if it's at all possible. Car already feels like it's a little faster. It's a little better coming out of the turns. We've got to be a little more careful with that throttle. But you can see, even on cold tires, that appears to have made a big difference going up to 1 inch in stagger. We'll let the car slide up above that green line, out onto the front straightaway. On cold tires, we just ran a 5:53, so we're 0.05 of a second off our best lap time, and that's on our very first lap. We'll see if this car gets to be a little better. Into the corner too hard that time. You can see the car really push up. I'm just not liking this car very much. It is uncouth.
22.923.
That's a little better. It still feels awful tight. This car's still feeling awful tight. We're getting out of the corner better than we were in the past.
22.574.
Running a little more consistently down in the 5s. I held the car a little lower that time. That's just kind of where it felt like it wanted to run. Definitely getting out of the corners better. It was a 5:09. We're knocking on the door of our best lap times so far. I think we'll probably, if I don't make any mistakes here, we might just be able to do something with that this lap. Got into that corner just a little hard, really having to turn the wheel. I'm just not liking this. This car is still very, very tight. Run one more lap here and see what happens. Let the car drift up, roll into the throttle. Get off the corner is okay. Car's really pushy in the middle of the turn, not really rotating very well at all. I think we're going to have to figure out how to loosen this car up.
22.548.
I think that was a little better. We were able to consistently run into the mid 22.5s. As we've said, though, we'd really like to get down to 22.2s. We're going to go back to the garage. I think we've done everything we can do here. See, we've still got, just in 7 or 8 laps, much more wear in the right front, and that's only going to become more pronounced as the race goes on. So this car, tight at the beginning, at the end of the race is going to be pushing like a dump truck. So we really want to see if we can't find a way to make this car a little more neutral at the beginning of the race. We're going to go into the chassis area now, and it looks like the right rear and the right front are a little bit high. I'm going to drop those a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and raise the ride height on the left side a little bit, and then I'll drop these again. I like to see the car be a little closer to level. We'll apply that. We're at 52.6 in our cross weight, and if you watch the earlier video on how to adjust this car, cross weight tells us if our cars are going to be getting tighter or looser. If I can drop the cross weight, I can loosen the car up. I'm going to go ahead and drop this one more time. Then I'm going to go ahead and, I'm at 52.7. I'm going to raise the right rear, and that's going to drop us to a 52.3, 52.4 cross weight. That should loosen the car up, and we'll see what happens. So remember, our best lap has been a 22.505. Ideally, we'd like to get into the 22.2s. That'd be a pretty good setup, at least for a starting setup for any of you guys that are racing at Thompson this week. This is Thanksgiving week 2020. And that should get you in a spot where in, the bottom 3 splits, so if you're not in the top split, if you're in the middle or lower, you should be very competitive. And then you can work on trying to figure out how to build a setup or adjust this setup so that it'll preserve tires. I can tell the car is much looser already. We're going to come into 2 or 3. Have to be kind of careful here. This car's still too tight. I can feel it slide up the racetrack. So I think we're going to want to loosen this car up even more if we get the opportunity.
573.
That was a 5.73 right out of the gate. And we're going to roll back into the throttle, come out of turn 2 down the back straightaway. Car's still too tight. Down just a little here, then back under. Car drift up just a bit in the middle of the turn, roll into the throttle. Decent corner, car still too tight. It just is not rotating the way I would like for it to rotate. We could make a spring change, but I think what I'd really like to do is work more on getting that cross weight down than doing anything else.
589.
Still running in the 5s, pretty decent corner there. A little tight coming out again. Feels like the car's scrubbing off speed as we come out of the corner. And it just doesn't feel like we're able to get into the throttle as much as we'd like.
22.554.
The other thing that happened when I lowered the ride height on the right side is I tightened the car up a little bit. That, I think, probably lowered the roll center in the rear. And that tightened the car up some. So we may find that we've got to go a little further on that crossweight adjustment. And I think that's what we're going to do here. That car's just too tight.
578.
We're able to run consistently in the 22.55s. That might be competitive in some of the lower splits, but in the higher splits, that's just not going to be fast enough. Let's go back to the chassis. I'm going to raise the right rear. No, I think I'm going to lower the left rear. And while I'm at it, I'm going to raise the right front. Remember when we do this, that if we lower the ride height in the left rear and the right front, we loosen the car up because the left rear and right front work together. If we raise the ride height in the left front and right rear, we also loosen the car up. So in effect, I went 2 steps by lowering the left rear and raising the left front. I went 2 steps in loosening the car up. As tight as the car was, I am not worried about this causing the car to be undrivable. I may need to be a little careful getting into the corners, but that car was so tight it was just about impossible to drive. Let's come back out, see what we can do. We're going to come into turn 3 again, kind of underneath that green line, let the car drift up, then roll into the throttle as we come out of 4, and we'll see what we've got. That's better. That's much better. Don't know if it's going to be good enough to get us down into our 22.2 range, but that was much better in terms of what that car feels like. Still sliding up a little bit in the middle of the corner. Feels like it's a little tight, but that was felt much better in 1 and 2.
22.513.
Might have driven in just a little deep there. Still running about a 5.5.
22.562.
Much better off of, feels like it's much better off of 2. I'll let off the throttle a little earlier and see if that helps us come off the corner here. Seems like it is helping us come off a little bit. Yeah, 4.98, that helps us out. That's maybe the best lap time we've run since we started. Had to ease up on the throttle, still pushy in the middle of the corner. Feels like we could loosen the car up even a bit more on the springs that we're running here.
22.4.
It's a 4.85, so we're making some progress as the car comes to us a little bit. The tires are warming up. Our ideal lap is going to be down in the 4.3 range. I don't think we can get there. You know, the two corners are a fair amount different. I got in a little too deep at that point in time.
22.557.
The car feels pretty good. It's just still slow. You know, we really want to get down into the 0.2 range. We've been able to run into the 22.4s, and that's okay, but it's really not ideal.
.565.
Roll back into the throttle. I'm not too happy yet. Yeah, the car's still really pushy, man. It pushed a mile that time. I know I went a little deep, but still terribly pushy. I think with the amount of push we're feeling, we're going to have to try something different. I'm not sure that making these ride height adjustments is aggressive enough. I think I want to drop the right front spring, and I want to raise that left front to compensate. I think that's my next step. I'm going to drop this. We're going to raise this one. That's going to give us about a % difference in crossweight. Let's see what happens after we make that change. So what we just did was we changed the spring rate on the right front. We softened it up by 25 pounds. We increased the left front spring rate by 25 pounds. That changed our crossweight by almost a %. And we'll see if that makes any difference. Boy, it sure made the way the car seems to want to turn in the middle of the corner much better. Boy, that's a lot better. My goodness, is that better. Really able to just hammer the throttle coming out of 2. Even on cold tires, we'll let the car come in, slide up just a little bit. Boy, that's a lot better. Isn't that something?
22.40.
We just ran a 408 on brand new cold tires. Car's still feeling pushy. I think we could loosen it up some more yet. But that sure did make a big difference.
22.518.
Drove in a little deep that time. That was on me. Fairly confident in the car, though. Still not loose at all. This car not feeling at least a little bit twitchy. And that means it's really not fast enough. We need to feel like that back end's going to step out from under us if we're not careful. That's really the best indication that we've got a car that's pretty quick. This car still feels like it's slipping and sliding on me in the corners. We're going to run one more lap here.
22.513.
Roll back into the throttle out of 2. We managed to get down into the low 4s. Really want to get down into the 2s if we can. Certainly would love to get into the high 2s. That's kind of a goal.
22.509.
I think this car is still way too tight. So I'm going to be pretty aggressive, and I'm going to change the springs another 25 pounds up front. We'll go to 300 now on the left front. Yeah, we'll go to 300 in the left front, and we'll drop the right front to 250, and let's see what that does for us. Ooh, that may be too much. You know what? Let's go to 275 and 250. It takes us to 49.8. Let's see what that feels like in this race car. And remember, we haven't really even adjusted the ride height yet either, so our ride heights could be all out of whack here. But I don't want to make too many adjustments at once. We're just going to change springs and go on. That feels even better. It felt pretty quick. There's a little bit of that loose feeling, so we're having to feel like we're going to need to be careful. Come out of 2 onto the back straight. Car's feeling a little slippery. It's going to be a pretty good lap.
22.40.
It's a 4:01. It'd really be nice to get down into the twos. We'll take a 4:01 at this point. I drove in way too deep there. You can see that car really diving up the racetrack.
22.73.
Car seems to be okay in 1 and 2, maybe not quite so good in 3 and 4. We won't dive in quite so deep. Let the car drift up, roll back into the throttle. What can we do coming off the corner?
22.455.
That's a 4.55. We're maybe gaining a little bit on it here. This is going to be a pretty good lap. It's a 3.99, so their first trip down into the threes, and the car's looking pretty good. Looks really good off of 2. It's a 3.95. It's a 400. Car's actually feeling really good right now. Feels the best it's felt since we started. If I'm just a little gentle getting in here, who knows what kind of lap we might be able to turn. Drove in just a hair too deep.
22.3.
Still managed to turn a 3.76, so we're gaining on the kind of lap we really want to be able to run. It's a 3.83, so we're consistently in the threes now, which is much, much better than when we started running in the 22.7s. So we've gained about 0.4 of a second a lap as we've worked through this setup. It still feels to me like it's tight. I still feel that this race car is tight. I'm not sure what to do about that yet.
22.427.
But it really does. It feels like the car is a little tight. That was a little better corner. Rotated through the middle pretty good there. But I still feel, this car still feels tight to me, especially in the center of the corner. Still, we'll take what we've gotten. Routinely in the 3s and 4s. We're going to make it maybe one more set of adjustments. Yeah, the car's still very tight. So we've got to figure out how to loosen this car up. What are we going to do? I think we're going to drop the left front. Right height. I don't like that very much. We're going to raise the right heights on the right side. And then we're going to drop that right front just a touch. So we've made some adjustments with our ride heights here. I tend to like to have a car that's got the highest, at Thompson, that's got the highest ride height in the right rear. That's what I tend to prefer. You don't have to prefer that if you don't want to, but that's what I tend to like. So we're going to try this one more time. We've got our cross down to 49.6. Our goal is to get into the 22.2s. We need to find another 0.08 of a second in this race car. Really got out of 4 well on these cold tires. We're going to see what happens. Car's a little more difficult to drive, but it is a whole lot faster now that we've made that change in the ride heights. This is going to bring us real close.
22.2.
And there's our first ever 22.2. That's a 22.283, and that's right out of the gate on cold tires. Don't know if we'll be able to match that. And one of the things that we really want to do when I work on setups, I try to go 6 or 7 laps in. On really cold tires, they tend to be better, and then as the tires warm up, these little cars tend to be better. Roll out of the corner onto the throttle, down the back straightaway. Got in a little hard there. Still feels tight. Feels like we could go even further if we wanted.
22.516.
It was a good corner. Yeah, it still feels tight, but that was a pretty good lap.
22.408.
Yeah, still feels tight. I feel like we could loosen this car up some more. I think I'm going to try loosen it up one more time, and then I'm going to call it good on this video. But I think this car still feels tight. So we're going to go to the garage. You can see we're still tight. Just look at the numbers: 95% in the front, 98% in the rear. This car needs to be loosened up. And I think to do that, I think I'm going to drop the ride height in the right front. Let's see what happens. Basically what we did was we took a click out of the right front. If we drop the ride height in the right front, we're going to loosen the car up. We'll make one more stab at a few good laps here. We ran a 2.83. We'll see what happens if we can really get after the race car here. If we can hammer that throttle, we'll see what we can do. That feels much better. It's looser yet. And let off the throttle a little early there. We're on cold tires. We're gonna roll back into the throttle.
22.2.
That'll run us down to a 2.62, which is a pretty good lap, and I'm pretty happy with that. We'll run maybe to lap number 65 or 70, and we'll call this video good. Pretty happy with a 2.62. I think most of you who follow our channel for tips and tricks would probably be pretty tickled with a 2.62 as well. Still feels a little tight. Feels like we could maybe go up. Actually feels like we could go up with the left front spring another 25 pounds.
22.323.
And we'd have to readjust all the ride heights if we did that, but that's really what it feels like. It feels like that left front spring, as it was pushing coming out there, I had to lift. That was going to be a great lap if I had not been pushy. So
22.351.
It's still pushy in the middle of the corner. It's rotating better, but still not good enough. I almost feel like we could go up another 25 pounds on that left front.
22.34.
Back-to-back 3-4s are not going to win you a race in the top group. Probably won't keep you in the top 8. But it'll sure be competitive in most other groups. Car's still feeling very tight to me.
.35. Slow car ahead.
Really got through 3 and 4 well there.
22.273.
If we could figure out how to get through 1 and 2 the way we got through 3 and 4 last time, we'd be in really good shape. Just touched the wall. Not enough to really matter.
.298.
Let's run one more lap here.
22.339.
That car's still tight. I can tell you that now. We need to loosen it up some more. It's still too tight. I would probably at this point, because of all the changes I've made, I would probably go another 25 pounds on the left front. That's probably where I'd go.
22.393.
All right. Well, that is an example of how I go about trying to build a qualifying setup. It takes time. It takes a lot of laps. You'll notice we ran almost 70 laps in this session, and we were able to go from 22 sevens down into the 22 twos and 22 threes consistently. So if this is something that you work on at every track, this Thompson's just an example because that's where we're racing this week. I don't know if this video is going to get posted in time to help you guys, but that's kind of the idea. We want to go out, we want to change one thing. We know we want to feel if the car is loose or tight, if it feels like it's pushing up the racetrack or doesn't want to rotate in the middle of the corner or feels like it wants to slide up into the wall as you come out. All those are tight conditions, and you want to make some changes that'll loosen that car up. Once you've made a lot of changes and the car's still not loose enough, then you make a big change, like a spring, and you go back and you do it all again. That's what I've got for you. This is kind of going to be it's about a 30-35 minute video. It's a fairly long video. I'm hoping to get it uploaded tomorrow. That would be the day after Thanksgiving, November 27th. And if I can, I will get it uploaded and make it available to you. If not, there's no telling when it might become available. Just keep in mind that what I've shown you in this video can be utilized really in any situation. For the Johnson iRacing team on the Johnson iRacing Network, this is Aaron Johnson saying, go fast, turn left, have fun.